If you love hearing behind-the-scenes business stories from inspiring content creators, this podcast is just for you. My name's Sam Barcroft, and I'm one of the pioneers of original documentaries on YouTube. Back in 2003, I started my company from my bedroom in Tottenham, London. 16 years and 70 million followers later, I sold my company, I bought a farm, and I settled in from my happy ever after. And now I've founded Creatorville to learn from the very best business minds in media and share their secrets with you. So join me as each week I ask a super producer to reveal the 3 biggest decisions they've made in their quest for success. And stick around at the end to hear my top takeaway from today's very special guest. Welcome to The Big Swing. Today, I'm speaking with Benjamin Cohen, the founder and chief executive of Pink News. With over 60 million unique monthly users, Pink News is the world's most popular platform for the LGBTQ+ community. And Benjamin is now one of the world's leading experts in building successful community-based digital brands. And he is the king of the hustle, constantly finding amazing new ways to build out fresh business opportunities. In many ways, Benjamin's entrepreneurial story is extraordinary. He started young, very young. Benjamin founded and sold his first venture whilst he was still a teenager, and in the process became, or briefly, the UK's youngest ever director of a publicly listed company. It was an amazing sign of his great success still to come. But then, in his early 20s, Benjamin found himself in a legal dispute with Apple over a website domain. So, how did Benjamin turn this nightmare into a job opportunity?
I was interviewed by a number of people during this legal battle. One place was Channel 4 News. Krishnan Gurumurthy interviewed me, but also The Times interviewed me. And I happened to be interviewed by The Times around the time of their Christmas party. And the journalist who interviewed me asked if I wanted to go to the Christmas party. And I went to the Christmas party. And while there, I got talking to the business editor of Times Online, as it was known then, who asked if I would like to write something about my experiences of running my business. And that turned into a column for The Times. And because I was writing this column, I used to write it every couple of weeks, I had asked, I'm gay, could I write something about LGB, the pink pound, things like that? And they basically said no. And they said, we have got Matthew Paris, who was actually a co-founder of Stonewall as a columnist. We have Andrew Pierce, who's now actually at the Daily Mail. He was a writer at the Times. So we have 2 gay people that write columns regularly. So we don't really need you to do that. We're just kind of interested in like the internet stuff and e-commerce and things. And that's what caused me to launch Pink News.
Was that like a visceral reaction?
Somehow, because of the just randomness of being sued by Apple, and then being interviewed about it and then going to this party and then from like the Times asking if I'd write a column, one column that turned into like 100. That then made me think I'd like to do something about gay issues. That was just literally for one piece. I don't think it was like an FU to the Times, but it kind of just led me thinking, well, it was more the fact that they were kind of pigeonholing where you've got these 2 older gay guys writing stuff and that's us covering gays, but it kind of just made me think, it's not really good enough. Just so we know when we're talking about this is 2005, right? 2005 was when civil partnerships were about to happen. And I believe it was the first time that Conservatives had allowed a free vote on a gay issue. And there was a leadership election happening in 2005 where there was a candidate called David Cameron who had said some things during his campaign which were making me think, there might be a change in heart in the way that the Conservatives might deal with this stuff. And I was thinking, is there really media that reflects where we are now? We're a country where gay and lesbian couples are going to be able to have their relationships recognized under law, have the same tax benefits and savings that heterosexual couples who are married could have. We have someone running to be Conservative leader who's sort of advocating for gay rights. The media doesn't really exist. And this all happened. This was a thought process in my shower the morning after the Times said, no, you can't write this piece. And I got out of the shower and I registered pinknews.co.uk. And I wasn't entirely sure what would go on it, but so I registered like 10 o'clock in the morning, and by 5 o'clock, because I could code quickly, there was a website up. The first couple of articles were written, and suddenly the world's largest, well, what would ultimately become the world's largest LGBTQ plus media company was born.
What a lovely origin story, because I suppose most entrepreneurs kind of have that moment, don't they?
Yeah.
Where a set of things kind of coalesce together, and all of a sudden you realize there's a step you can take, which only takes one work day, that can move it from an idea into something big. So that must have been a wonderful night when you actually realized you'd gone from rejection the day before to actually having created something within 24 hours. How did that feel?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I wasn't with my husband then, my ex-boyfriend. He came back from work. He was a civil servant, and he came back. I showed him this website, and I was like, "Oh, look, I've written an article for it." And then he clicked through it, and he's like, "All of the articles are written by you." So I was like, "Yeah, I actually just made this website this morning." And it was it was kind of like, that was my goal, was just to like do like a kind of like stun thing that night. And then what was so interesting was it just very quickly gained traction. Important things to note was that at the time there were other LGBT, well, gay media and lesbian media, and there was a publication called Pink Paper, but it published once a month, and its website had like 100 articles, and then they got rid of the content. So there was no archive. It wasn't properly indexed. They didn't have a newsletter. Like, it's basically all the things that ultimately we ended up doing, they didn't do. And that's how the business grew very quickly, or the audience grew.
So Benjamin hustled, he was knocked back, and then did what all entrepreneurs do when they hit an obstacle. He turned adversity into an opportunity. And that opportunity was to create Pink News. But despite spotting the gap in the market, Benjamin knew that at the beginning it couldn't provide him with enough income to live off. So he took the job that Channel 4 News offered him as a correspondent. And that job did a lot more than just pay the bills. It opened the doors to a whole new world of opportunities.
And, I learned how to do journalism from them. And that really informed what ultimately we ended up doing with Pink News. I also learned about how inefficient mainstream media companies are, but I also learned what I didn't want it to be from the experiences that I had at Channel 4 News.
Of course, Benjamin was way too entrepreneurial to stay working as a news correspondent for the rest of his career. So when the issue of legislating for gay marriage in the UK became a national debate, Benjamin's long-standing campaign for equality became a problem for Channel 4 News management. And this set the stage for Benjamin's first big swing.
I had an issue because Channel 4 News considered that this was a political campaign, and that gay people having the same rights as straight people was not a human rights issue fundamentally, but a party political issue. And therefore, my support of it as a gay man could, I say could very carefully, could be considered to be in breach of the broadcasting code, which requires news programming to be politically impartial. So it set me at a dispute with ITN, that makes Channel 4 News.
How did that leave you then, Benjamin, with ITN? Were you in a situation there where this big decision to kind of move away from Channel 4 News was in your gift, or had they already decided in the background, you think that?
I know it was my decision to leave, but like, if I think about the different things that I weighed up, I had, on one hand, I wanted to start a different business that I thought I could do something else with. I also had a campaign that was really important to me, and that this would conflict with what they believed in. Also, while I was at Channel 4 News, I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I didn't feel that they were really good enough. And I've talked about it and written about it, even at the time. So I had a period where I couldn't see properly out of my left eye. And there was a debate about whether I would be allowed to wear an eye patch in the studio, even though that actually, it was so painful sometimes to be in the studio, and it was really bad.
Is that because of too many lights?
Yeah.
So did you feel it was high risk at that stage then to consider leaving Channel 4?
If I go through the steps, I left I missed being on Channel 4 News, to be honest. But then I kind of realized that I did have a business I really cared about, which was Pink News, and that we're having a big debate about same-sex marriage. And I had like a crisis of like, what am I doing, for sure? I knew that I wanted to leave Channel 4 News, but ultimately the decision that I took initially was to do a different business rather than concentrate on Pink News. And I was uncertain about what my place in the world was, because I was just turning 30 when this happened. It was like a period of like change for me. If I'm just like super honest though, Pink News couldn't afford to pay me what I used to be paid by Channel 4 News. I needed more money than I had. And I decided I wasn't doing that startup, didn't like that. So basically I ended up partnering up with someone who was growing a PR company called Clarity, which is growing really well. And I sort of worked with them 2 days a week during that period while I was sort of growing Pink News. But I was able to get to my Channel 4 News salary from different bits. I also wrote for the Evening Standard and stuff like that.
So it's really interesting what you say there, Benjamin, because you found yourself in a position where you had to put together some of your skills to kind of stack up your wages in order to get back to where you'd been before.
Yeah.
Reflecting back on that, do you think that was quite a breakthrough for you, having to kind of almost start again and reorganize everything at that stage of your life?
Basically, when I turned 30, I had just left a job which a lot of people recognized me from, and like that was who I was, Channel 4 News. I was in the middle of a campaign to bring in same-sex marriage. So I was doing a lot of like political things, but it's when I met my husband. And so age 30, everything changed. And I would really like, my 30s were an amazing decade because it was when everything kind of like slotted into place. It was a really big decision, and I did regret it for a little bit. But I think I regret it just because I needed to redefine who I was. I ultimately couldn't do what I precisely wanted to do, which was to concentrate on Pink News, because we weren't at that stage that it could support me in the way that I wanted to. Then the 2 years that I worked at Clarity PR, I met really interesting people, some of the clients, which ultimately we ended up working with at Pink News. But also I just saw a different world of also how to tell like the media story. And that meant that the end of 2015, I was able to just like put everything to one side. And I was just doing Pink News.
So it took Benjamin 10 years from founding Pink News to being in a position to go full-time and dedicate himself completely to building out his own business. And now he was all in. Needless to say, it wasn't long before Benjamin faced his next big swing.
End of 2015, I went to New York, and we were at that point thinking, well, let's raise some money for Pink News. Ended up going to meet some of the funds. Those funds then introduced us to another business that they'd invested in that they thought we might want to merge with, and it'll be acquired by, all of whom don't exist anymore because people raised too much money. But while I was in New York, someone said, oh, I really think you need to see this app called Snapchat. And I was like, this is interesting. There'd been some polling that year which showed that 49% of Gen Z define their sexuality as not 100% straight.
That kind of brings us to your next big swing then, doesn't it? Was the potential opportunity to partner with Snapchat? Because at that point, Pink News, I suppose, is a multi-dimensional digital business.
So what happened was, while I was there, I saw Snap, but something else happened. This is when Facebook grew massively in terms of like publishers, when like BuzzFeed was having its heyday. And we were working with a lot of influencers on Facebook to share our content. We used to pay them. Met one of my influencers when we were there, George Takei. He was doing a show in Broadway.
Is that the famous Star Trek actor?
Yeah, exactly. Who was he controlled the internet for that period. That's how I grew my audience in the States initially. We paid him like a small fee for each click that we'd get from his Facebook page, and we would then sell the ads for more. That was the plan, and it did really.
That was your arbitrage.
Yeah. It was
he was huge. He was huge back then.
Yeah,
George.
He was absolutely massive, and it would be like insane numbers that you could get really quickly. So I was there for multiple different reasons, right? So I was in New York, met with some VCs, met George Takei, also met some people from this thing called Snapchat. And I was like, this is interesting. We weren't on Snapchat. At that point, there were only like 10 publishers on there. I kept trying to like convince Snap that we should be their partner. At that point, Pink News had like 7 people working for us. Like, we were really small. It was just people creating written content. Most of our advertising sales, either I did them myself or they were just programmatic, Facebook audience network, all of that sort of stuff. But we had started to grow. There's no question we'd grown. In 2017, I had been talking to Snap for quite a while, still trying to convince them, but not really getting that breakthrough, actually, as it happens. Like, we were talking.
Oh, do you know, Benjamin, we could talk for hours about how many times I begged them to put my content on Snap. It took a while for many of us, didn't it?
So in 2017, a couple of things happened. We hired the longest serving employee that we have to now, our head of tech and adults, because until that point, I was also doing all the tech on the website and I was uploading all the ads and all of this stuff. So at least I don't do that anymore. And that year was the 50th anniversary of the partial decriminalisation of homosexuality. Every living British Prime Minister wrote for Pink News on the date of the anniversary. And at the Pink News Awards that year, Theresa May, the then Prime Minister, along with the leaders of all the other main Westminster parties, were in attendance and made speeches. And some people from Snap were there. And I think that was really helpful in them seeing that we were like a real and trustworthy partner to be working with. And in the beginning of 2018, Facebook made a couple of announcements. You can't pay influencers to share your content unless it's disclosed. And if you disclose it with a paid partnership, we're not going to give any distribution. So, okay, can't use George Takei, not doing that anymore. George is not doing that.
So that brought that to an end for you. Your kind of clever arbitrage of mega Hollywood influencers fell away.
So beginning of 2018, no more of that. We're going to change the algorithm so that publishers get less.
And Facebook was really important for your business at that stage in terms of...
Yeah, it was like the majority of our traffic. As it happens, it's all come back, but traffic from Facebook like drop. Can't use the arbitrage. And then we're like, we haven't heard from Snap. I've been like, what's going on? And I emailed and I got an out of office saying that the person I'd been like waiting to hear back from had gone. But there was this like email address of someone called Mike Sue. Contact Mike Sue if you've got any queries. And so I emailed Mike that night and he said, oh, do you want to jump on a call tomorrow? And I was like, okay. And we went on a call with Mike from Snap the next day. And then we began a 6-month piloting process to launch on Snapchat Discover. So basically, we needed to scale up like massively and rapidly if we were to do this. And at that point, it was still very few publishers on the platform. And we weren't really doing video at any scale. At that point, it wasn't full shows. It was like little like graphical video things. And you'd swipe up to read an article, which would be imported from the website. Or you'd make a quiz and things like that. And it was a big decision to do it.
And what were the risks then of getting involved in that with Mike?
We invested $250,000 into doing all of the different work that we needed to do. Now, that was a big decision, but here's the thing. When I'd been in New York and I said that lots of different like VCs and people had like made me go and meet different companies that might want to acquire us. One of the companies said, would you be interested in doing some sort of like deal where you could roll up your audience, Comscore audience with us and we'll sell some ads? So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that. But you need to give me a minimum revenue guarantee, an advance payment. And that advance payment was $250,000. Mike didn't sell any ads. But they gave us $250,000 for nothing. That was $250,000 I used to grow our audience for Snap.
Because that was quite a typical thing back in those days, wasn't it? The digital media companies in America needing to show that they had huge audiences and therefore doing quiet kind of deals in the background with publishers in other countries to be able to essentially bolt their audiences into their Comscore. So, wow, you've done a brilliant piece of entrepreneuring there, really, because your kind of audience and your whole Facebook-based business has been going down quite a lot. You see a new opportunity in Snapchat that looks kind of remarkable and potentially a game saver, but you've got this problem, which is where do I find $250,000? And I'm imagining at that scale, at that moment, $250,000 was pretty big stake for you guys right at that point.
Yeah. And it wasn't Snap saying, you need to spend this. I just needed to hire a load of people. Back in those days to launch on Snap, and it's definitely not the case now, but in those days, they kind of made you publish lots of daily editions that no one saw. And so it took us a long time, quite a few months actually, even from launching on there, that we were making a profit from the content that we were creating. I mean, we now make a great profit from the content we create on Snap. It was still risk, right? I could have used that money for something else, but I was super lucky that there was just this extra load of money in our bank account. Snap has, I would say, pretty bad press at the moment. I think unfair. But at that point as well, it had really quite unfair press. I don't know what it is about Snap, but it's always underestimated by the digital media press. It's always kicked when actually it's an amazing platform for full screen storytelling, great for advertising, revenue's growing year on year. People complaining revenue's not growing as fast as people might want, but it's still growing. When I said, we're going to launch on Snap, and I said to other like digital media people, I'm going to do this. They're like, you're mad. Like, why aren't you just spending all your time and effort on like Instagram? No, I really believed what Snap had said to us when we first worked out like what the business plan would be. It was a tough decision because I ultimately risked a lot of the future of the business on that. But I knew I'd lucked out when day one we launched, and there was like 1 million new people watching Pink News content on that day. But I think it was like 1 million people by the time I got to the office had already, from home, had already like watched the first edition. I was like, okay, right, this definitely does work. They are telling the truth. It's a really powerful platform. Go through our company accounts and you can see we're making a lot more money.
And so that must have been a huge relief then, because you'd taken this decision to invest all this money and time and effort, because bringing in teams to make original video in vertical formats with covered in graphics, that at the time was quite new as well, wasn't it? So you're having to kind of build a genre of video storytelling at the same time. That must have felt like quite exciting editorially, but quite nerve-wracking financially and operationally, was it? To grow your business away from text and pictures and into kind of upright video in such a kind of deliberate way.
It was really hard. Look, I'll be super honest. The challenge that we had is we just had to grow really quite quickly, and I don't think we spent enough time and effort at that point in the growing period to build the company culture. At that point, it's still really small, right? So we started 2018 at like 10 people, and we probably ended 2018 at like 20 people. But that is doubling the team. And it was hard because what we were all about was just growing and being able to service what we were doing and being able to iterate the content offering, but without a clearly laid out culture. We had a mission that I don't think everyone kind of understood. It did take us quite a few years to get that right. So like today, there's nearly 70 people. We started this year at only 30 something. So, and then we're aiming to hire 100 next year. There's been this like kind of growth recently since doing that deal with Snap. But I don't think we got it right at the start.
Pink News was now growing at breakneck speed. If Benjamin didn't get a handle on the company culture, the business would become unmanageable and all his efforts would come to nothing. Benjamin's success with Snap set the stage for his third big swing. In the background, Benjamin's husband Anthony, a doctor with experience in digital technologies, an MBA and an interest in corporate strategy, had been working almost like an unpaid consultant to Pink News.
And Alex, our COO, had got married and was moving back home, decided to move back home to Australia. And so there was going to become a vacancy to be COO at Pink News. And we just sort of made the decision, or he made the decision, that this is our business. He was hearing about Pink News all the time. He's been my informal advisor for 10 years. He's been sort of on the side, actually worked a lot on the strategy that we've already implementing for our growth strategy, going from one Snapchat show to now, I think we have nearly 30. And so the big decision ultimately wasn't mine. It was my husband's decision that should he leave the NHS and work for Pink News full time. And ultimately he made the decision that he would. And I think it was really, really important decision. The business is so much better since we've been able to lead it as a couple and as an entity, the two of us, because there's things that he's amazing at, which is more like organizational. He's a lot more, I would say, empathetic than me. And we've got like a good division. So all of the things that are content related sort of flow into me. And we jointly kind of manage some of the commercial things, but all of the operation and people and culture sit with him. Plus, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm the sort of person who I like to just I'll just come up with an idea and just do it.
Well, a bit like you explained at the beginning. You set Pink News up, coming out of the shower, and by the time you got to that night, it was already up and running,
Yeah.
right? And that's really great when you're an individual with an idea, but it's not so great if you're running a business with 70 people in it.
No.
Right?
So I sometimes think, oh, it's like too corporate, but like processes, planning days, OKR processes, something I'm now going to say the wrong. There's just all these different terms, right? So you can bet when you hear the two of us like at like a team meeting, you can tell which one has an MBA and which one doesn't. I'm more about like instinct, whereas Anthony's about process. But actually, it's ended up being a really good like marriage of things. And to be honest, the weird thing is that in our like personal lives, we're actually probably the opposite. So I'm the one who does the organizational things, sorts out our insurance, our mortgage, all of those sorts of things. Anthony is picking the wallpaper and like, how does the house look? But in our business world, like Anthony is the kind of like process person, and I'm the kind of creative one, and that's kind of quite good.
So it's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah, because I obviously started my business 17 years ago, and my wife came into our business fairly soon afterwards, and it's exactly the same. I mean, my view is about product and sales and entrepreneurship, and was always about making sure the accounts were in a good shape and that everything was being done properly and looking after the needs of the quiet members of the team and all the kind of very important things that necessarily weren't front of my brain. And I suppose from your big swing of yourself and Anthony working together, it's a different type of risk, isn't it? It's more of a personal risk, I suppose, you're taking at that point. Collaborating at work fully. I mean, you're fully committed as a married couple, but it's a really different thing to kind of go full time in your day as well as in your evening. Was
Yeah, and look, what I would say is that the thing I was most fearful of was how would this affect our relationship? And there were some real challenging things like a year ago, some hires that we made that were not the right hires, that were hard to deal with. And it was difficult for us as a couple because we didn't always agree, and then it was quite hard to escape. And just like some things like personal things that we've had to deal with, on our journey like as a married couple, it has been challenging. Like last year, I have MS and I had two relapses, and there was the thing that convinced me that Anthony should be the COO was before actually our then COO had left. When I had one of the MS relapses, I had some challenges for a week in being able to speak properly. So Anthony's job that week was basically wasn't being the COO because he wasn't then, but it was basically being the CEO because I had to kind of like in the limited communication that I could do, communicate and just let him make decisions as well. And I don't think people recognize the challenge that or the strain it can put on a relationship, but ultimately our relationship has become better, I think, because we're doing this together. But it was hard, because you can't escape, and particularly when you're working from home a lot of the time, so you can be like you're on top of each other all the time, and you can kind of like be annoyed with each other for some other thing, like has he unloaded the dishwasher or something. But in general, the best decision we made was doing that because it's enabling us to share the load together. But my relationship and us getting on is much more important, I would say, than the success of the business, because it's like my love. But also what's been really helpful for me during this period is I've been seeing like a exec coach slash psychologist who I'd sort of chat to each week to kind of decompress the kind of everything that's going on. What's actually really good is that she's a psychologist as well as being a coach. So she's from the world of like this type of business, but also has a psychology like PhD, like doctorate. So that you can then interpret how you're feeling from a psychological perspective, as well as sometimes we're just talking about HR things.
Performance, yeah.
And it's actually really helpful having another person to talk through different things with. I think has actually been helpful, particularly as the person I used to talk about those things in years gone by was Anthony, but now Anthony is part of it, so I can't use him as my kind of like emotional
External sounding
yeah,
board.
because he's part of it.
Yeah, right. Having made the positive decision to get yourself a coach / psychologist means that you've not lost Anthony's role as an emotional support for the business side of your personality, because he's actually in there helping you every day. But you've gained some extra external perspective by having this weekly discussion. And thank you for sharing that, because I mean, I have a coach and I'm not sure what I'd do without him. But I think a lot of people wouldn't be clever enough or honest enough to explain that that's how they've chosen to solve that challenge.
Oh well, mine was an ultimatum. Anthony said, if you don't get someone else, then there's going to be an issue. So I found someone, and it was the right thing to do, because I definitely found that during that first period that we were working together full time, it was really hard to even just be like watching some TV program without pausing every like 5 minutes to like be like, by the way, blah 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 blah. And it's just hard. It is hard when you're running a business together. It's quite hard to escape, and we were finding it hard. And I still say we're not perfect, and we're still finding some of those bits difficult because there's just a lot going on. But the fact that I'm able to have my own person to kind of discuss stuff with that's not Anthony has been really, really helpful. We're actually looking at the moment, though, at finding it's kind of like, well, I don't know, I'm using this as a therapy session where we are thinking about having someone who could also be our like joint person. So we need to have our own individual person, but then we want to have like our own someone separate that's to help us as a couple navigate the world of being a married couple running a business together, with all of the stresses and strains that any married couple probably normally has anyway, plus the additional strains of like being a married couple running a fast growing business. And in that time, since Anthony's been part of the business and we've been working together and sharing the load and sharing the responsibilities, our revenue has grown massively. Our profitability has grown significantly as well. And I genuinely, when I talk to our team, the business has become a much better place to work. And that's the reason why people are leaving some of the big names in mainstream media all the time and coming to work at Pink News. And I'm getting colleagues from across the industry moaning at me on WhatsApp about why are we stealing all their stuff? Well, we're not going and headhunting them. They're just applying on our careers hub because they've heard that Pink News is a great place. We're a business with a mission and a purpose, and our mission is to inform, inspire change, and empower people to be themselves. And we've made that part of everything that we do. And the atmosphere there is something I couldn't have imagined before. And what I hear every day from some of the team about like how comfortable they feel at work, that this is somewhere they really want to be, and like, oh, I know this friend who might want to come and join, and then the friend joins. It's really great. And that,
well, congratulations. because it's really difficult to do that, and it's a lot of hard work in the background, and it's a lot of listening that you have to do to
But
figure out.
genuinely, I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't with Anthony, because I think that he's led that. And I think what's also really important I've learned through my journey is also understanding what you're not good at. And it's not that I'm not interested in those things. I'm just not as good at some of those things. And understanding that the two can then marry together can create a much better experience, both from a client perspective, an audience perspective, and a team perspective too.
Just before I share my takeaways from today's chat, I wanted to tell you about next week's episode with the amazing Jessica Hargrave. Jess is one of Hollywood's most sought-after producers, making high-end documentaries for the big screen and gangbuster shows for the major streamers. Together with her business partner Ryan, Jessica was behind the Netflix hit The Keepers and The Extraordinary Assassins, a movie about the brazen North Korean assassination of their supreme leader's half-brother. Jess is currently on the publicity trail for Goodnight Oppie, which she made with Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment and George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic for Amazon Studios. Now that's a bit of a team. It charts the epic story of how NASA's Mars rover expedition turned from a 30-month mission into a 15-year remarkable journey. So Jessica's story is just as inspiring, and I can't wait to share it with you all. So to sum up then, Benjamin's had an incredible career, from doing work experience as a schoolchild to running one of the UK's shining lights in digital publishing, and he shared his 3 big swings with us. But which one of these was the most impactful overall? Was it number 1, leaving the safety and notoriety of being a Channel 4 news correspondent for Pastures New? Or number 2, spending a windfall amount of money pivoting the business towards this brand new platform called Snapchat? Or was it number 3, throwing convention to the wind and welcoming his husband in as COO of the business? 3 huge decisions, but which one meant the most?
It's hard to say which ones. So the actual honest thing is, obviously, none of it would have happened if I hadn't have left Channel 4 News. I left Channel 4 News, which meant I happened to be at the Pink News office just before my 30th birthday. Pink News office then in Shoreditch, and that meant while I was there, I switched on Grindr, and while there, I saw this person who ultimately became my husband and sent him a message. If I hadn't have also left Channel 4 News, I wouldn't have had the freedom to properly lead the Out for Marriage campaign, which meant that both that we and tens of thousands of other people were able to have the right to marry. But also it was that campaign and being at the forefront of equal marriage that I would say solidified Pink News's position, ultimately leading to the growth that we had, and frankly for us to even be in the position to do like the deal with Snapchat, which ultimately meant I could bring that long term my husband would be able to join as COO. So obviously no one can pinpoint the precise thing that changed everything, but in my view you have to think narratively. And if I'd have stayed at Channel 4 News even for a few weeks longer, I just don't think I would have met my husband. And I'm really excited for the future for me and Anthony as a couple, and for Pink News as a business, as we continue to grow, following our mission of informing, inspiring change and empowering people to be themselves. And do you know what else? I feel empowered to be myself because I'm leading a business which that's at the heart of what it does.
Oh, well, that's a massive achievement, because a lot of people have values and missions and then don't apply them
Totally.
in practice. And so the businesses that I see that really do well are the ones where people actually act what they say and do what they promise to do for others internally. And so no wonder you've got a highly engaged, positive, talented workforce, and no wonder you're growing so healthily. Benjamin, thank you so much for sharing your story, for being so transparent and honest, and for inspiring us all to say yes to party invitations along the way.
Definitely.
It's been brilliant to spend this time together, and thank you for being part of the Big Swing.
Thank you.
So I've just listened back to my conversation with Benjamin Cohen. What a man! I mean, Benjamin is relentless. The hustle is constant. He's always thinking about how he can achieve that next thing, go up to that next level. And I can't believe all these things we've talked about, Benjamin's achieved before the age of 40. But putting that to one side, what's really remarkable about our chat is how brave he is. Benjamin's managed to do all these things whilst dealing with MS. And it's a really difficult illness to deal with. And to have built up all these businesses and all the parts of Pink News that are still functioning and still making sense whilst managing his health on a daily basis is a huge achievement. It just takes such guts and determination. And that's not all he has to face up for. I mean, Benjamin gets a lot of stick from people in public sector, people in the public eye, and from folks that just totally disagree with him. And he's taken on some of the world's most famous brands and most famous celebrities. So he's got such a lot of bravery. And he's brave enough even to share that he uses a coach and a psychologist to help him manage those ups and downs of running his business and of his home life. And it takes such a lot of courage to admit that you need support and that you bring people around to help you be the best person you can. I mean, Benjamin's built an incredible business that works so hard to look after that LGBTQ plus community. And I think that's the kind of business model that is going to do amazingly well as the media company of the future. You know, forget being ITV1 and trying to be all things to all people. Deciding that you're going to absolutely celebrate and relentlessly work for one community is, I think, what's going to make more and more sense as we go forward. So I hope Benjamin's remarkably proud of what he, Anthony, and the rest of the Pink News team are achieving, because they're doing an incredible job. The Big Swing podcast is produced in association with the amazing Spirit Studios. Our executive producer is Fred Casella, our sound designer is Will Horrocks, and The Big Swing was created by me, Sam Barcroft.